Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words, where every show I talk to writers from across the literary spectrum about their work and how they do what they do in this crazy publishing industry that we have all decided we want to be part of. Some of my writers are really well-known names that you've probably seen on the New York Times bestsellers list, and others are maybe just emerging and getting their work out there for the first time. The point is, this is a great place to come and hear how successful folks go about plying their craft. And hopefully you'll learn something. I know I do every single time. And while we're talking about learning something, help me out. If you haven't hit subscribe, please do so now. I'm on YouTube, of course, under the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words. Same name for the podcast, which is on all of the major podcast platforms. If you're looking to learn something about writers and writing and publishing, this is the place to do it. And it's a lot cheaper than buying craft books, which I think are a gigantic waste of time. But maybe we'll talk about that later. In any case, let me get to it because my guest today is author Sarah Rau Peterson, who I will be honest with you was something of a mystery to me coming into the interview because I only recently discovered her book of short stories, and it was a referral to me by Craig Lancaster, who's also been on this show before. Great author from near where Sarah is from in Montana. Anyways, Sarah's short story collection is called Hunting Geese. I am a short story aficionado, though mostly in the crime fiction realm, but I read it and I absolutely could not put it down. It was some of the finest writing that I've come across in quite a long time. And so I feel very, very fortunate to have her on the show. The book has been described as having characters as multi-layered as the state itself, and stories that capture the soul of Montana. I love that. I absolutely agree. Like I said, I had a hard time putting it down. So without further delay, let me say hello to Sarah Rau Peterson. Sarah, thanks for joining me here on the Open Mic. How are you doing today?
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me and saying such wonderful things. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Great. Well, I hope you're still excited at the end. Start well anyway. Anyway, let's I've talked a little bit about the book, of course, but let me ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself and about the book, and then we'll get into it a little bit more.
Sure. Well, I've lived here in Miles City, Montana. We're in the southeastern corner. And I've lived here since 1997, kind of off and on, went to college in Billings. So not too far. I didn't stray too far. I grew up in Butte, Montana. And if anybody's familiar with Montana, you've probably heard many stories about Butte and its colorful history and colorful present as well. Yeah. And I live here in Miles City with my husband and my two kids. We have a cattle ranch here. And, you might have guessed by some of my stories. We run anywhere from 500 to 250 mama cows. And my kids are in 7th grade and sophomore. And so we're pretty busy. I teach too. So I have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So I might be a little crazy.
I can say the teaching is probably, I'm sure, the hardest part of what you do, especially these days. Just a really short story. My grandparents on my mother's side met on a cattle drive. I'm 59 years old. My mom was 40 when she had me. So my grandparents were born in the 1890s, and they literally met on a cattle drive. I want to say it was from somewhere in Texas to Belfouche, South Dakota. And my grandfather was a cowboy. He was a young man, and my grandmother was a young woman working the chuck wagon, and that is how they met. So I have a very deep appreciation for ranch life, even though I didn't grow up with it. As we were saying before we went on the air, my generation were the first ones who didn't grow up in that environment. But maybe that's one of the reasons I had such a strong reaction to your stories, because I think they resonated with me on a deep level, and in great part not just because of the setting, but because they were also really about relationships and father daughter, husband wife, parent child, etc. That really every story felt very profoundly deep in that regard. What inspired this theme? Was that intentional?
This that question really gave me pause. It was not, absolutely not intentional. Um, but those are the most complicated relationships in my life. The father-daughter relationship. I'm very close to my dad. And of course, every spouse is a very deep uh, relationship, and I'm a parent as well. So I think when you have the old adage of write what you know, I think that's just where it comes from.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as you noted, all those relationships are deep, and you know, the reality is of life, they often tend to have a sense of conflict, and I mean that's life, right? Nothing is ever. I mean, TV is one thing, but reality, parents get older. Sometimes our kids don't do the things we want them to do. Sometimes we don't do the things our kids want us to do. We all those kinds of things. And I noted that these stories, while they have sometimes a real sadness, sense of regret to them, in some cases a weariness with all of the challenges of life, marriage and parenthood, ranch life, which is much different than the kind of urban life I live, and with loss in particular. But they were not morose. They were not maudlin. There was not anything like, oh, woe is me. I mean, they felt real. So I was really curious, what was your process like in writing each of these stories? And you don't have to answer this part, but were you calling anything from your own life as you were putting these together?
So, I didn't set out to write anything to go with a certain feeling or a certain mood. Everything just came. And I think, the time of my life where I started a couple of these, because there's never just one start and one stop. It's always just kind of lots of irons in the fire. Um, but I think we were having a severe winter at one point, and we were having a severe drought at another point. And those things really affect the agricultural way of life. And even though I was employed off the ranch, those things are just they stick with you, those emotions. And I'm really, really grateful for you to say that it wasn't like sad and woe is me. But it's I'm not generally a super happy writer. um and so it wasn't intentional, but I think it's very very true to how I write. Not depressing, but more real. And let's address these kinds of feelings because they're not bad, they're normal feelings, and people struggle, and there's beauty in that too. And we can have both aspects of pain and struggle and heartbreak and reflection, without feeling depressed or exhausted.
Yeah.
Now the is it true to life? So this is the first thing that my dad says to me upon reading these stories is, "Oh my gosh, that's about me." Well, and no. There's not one single character that is one single person. But because I'm a human and I'd like to think I write human characters, it's not fantasy. I don't write fantasy. But of course, everybody's going to see a piece of them in a character. So that's something that's going to happen. There are true stories that come out, true anecdotes. There's a story where, oh, my light just shut off. I'm in my classroom and it's a motion light.
No problem.
So there are stories that are true. There is a story that talks about hunting geese at Freeze Out Lake in 1980, and when the US beat the Russian hockey team in the Olympics, and Marv Albert makes that great call, "Do you believe in miracles?" That actually is a story my dad experienced and told me. So that's probably where he got that. But, and of course, the places are real, and some events, but no, there's no person, there's no, this is a real true story. I had some chickens and, they pooped everywhere, that on all the farm equipment. That really happened. So, so I hope that answered a little bit.
Absolutely. For those who may be wondering, there was a story about a woman trying to protect her chickens from predators, and I'll leave it at that. I don't want to ruin anything. But that's the thing. I'm thinking of what your dad said. I saw in my mind's eye my grandfather a lot, who I was, of course, just talking about in that story, hunting geese. Not hunting geese. The one with the adult daughter dealing with her father. Because my grandfather, who I love to death, but he was a tough guy, and at times, right, he could be a real tough guy because ranch life is tough. You don't have a lot of free time. I don't have to tell you that. And you learn to be self-reliant. And I think the thing about that story that really resonated with me was, I don't know how you put down being self-reliant. And that's an aging thing that we all of us will deal with our parents. And I thought you just captured that, both her frustration, his frustration, the communication issues that are there, and finally just the acceptance of, well, this is how it is. And that's why what I mean when I say it was not maudlin at all, it really felt real to me. It really felt like, my mom passed away many years ago, but I can remember going through similar situations with her before she died, where she was becoming a challenge to deal with, because she was always a challenge to deal with. She had a really strong personality, and the same thing.
That's what we like.
Yeah. So anyway, that long-winded way of saying, I know you said some of these stories maybe started a long time ago. When did you at any point say, look, I'm going to put these together in a book, or I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do a few more and put these together because I want to do this as a book? Or was it something that at some point you said, I've got a bunch of these, I'll see if I can sell them as a collective? I mean, just from the mechanical aspect, how did you put that together?
Sure. It was, it was definitely a crapshoot. I had these stories, and several of them had been published. Hunting Geese was published in Camas magazine, which is out of the University of Montana. And then several were published at the Montana Quarterly magazine, and that's published in Livingston, Montana. And there were one or two that I thought needed a little bit more. I had something more to say. That's why two of them, one is from the father's perspective and the other one's from the daughter's perspective. I felt like there was just more to say, but no, in no way did I ever start out thinking, I'm going to write something and put it all together. I am a short story writer. I don't know that I can write anything bigger than that. So they just kind of came, and that's what I had together. And so I packaged them together and said, I got some great feedback from readers in the Montana Quarterly. And I thought, well, why not? Let's see what we can do with this. And those were the ones that I had that were the cleanest and most ready to package together.
Well, this is probably just adding on to something I said a little bit ago. In this day and age, we're so polarized with the insanity of politics and social strata and all these things. And one of the things that I reflected on after I finished the stories was, I think we tend to, because of that, we tend to think of people who live somewhere other than where we live or are outside of, the environment where we're at, in these very stark ways. Everybody in that place is this way. And I think, a lot of people look at rural environments and they really think of them as not being reflective and not whatever. And I really loved it because, of course, I feel like I know different than that, but I really loved it because there was so much humanity in these characters, so much reflection, and so much, um, and it was in such different ways, whether it was an older male, or the woman wanting to protect her chickens, while at the same time being frustrated with her husband and things like that. Those are so real. Um, you mentioned the thing that's leading me to this is you mentioned the feedback. What was that feedback? And uh, you know, did it run a gamut? Am I the only one who saw all these things, or what did other people think about these as you were getting this feedback?
I have to give a shout out to the quarterly editor Scott McMillian, because he's reached out to me, and he reaches out to me now and says, what do you got? I'm looking for some more fiction. What do you got? But he would always shoot me an email and say, there's a great response, or people are really saying great things, but that's it. He never has told me anything specific, Scott. But I think that's okay, because I don't want to let that taint anything. I don't know that it would, but if somebody said, I'd like to hear more development in your character or expand on the setting, um, that's great. But I just wouldn't want anything to be forced from that sort of feedback. But he has never told me that somebody's like, oh, I hate it. Absolutely not. And go on a Twitter rampage about it. So I think that's good. But even just hearing from friends who have read it, or acquaintances, and say specific things like you're sharing, that I really related, or I saw my grandfather, I saw my dad, or I heard my aunt's voice. And it's those things that mean the most to me. Because we're not a bunch of rednecks, and we're not a bunch of hillbillies. We're we might act like that. But we are people with big hearts and big souls. And just because some people might not say a lot doesn't mean that's not true. And so hearing that people are finding themselves and others in there is great feedback to me.
How did you decide on the title? I know that's the one of the stories title, but you know, uh, anybody who writes words that they put up, to try to do a novel, knows that your title is going to get messed with, right? Nobody will ever. So, did you get to choose the title, and was there any hassle for getting to keep the title as it is, Hunting Geese?
No to all of that. That the publisher, Unsolicited Press, out of Portland, Oregon, is, they took it on, and that's what they gave, and that's the story they wanted to run first, and is my favorite story. So I was fine with it. I felt it was simple. But I do explain to a lot of people that's not what it's about. The stories are not about the act of hunting geese. So if you Google it, you are going to get a lot of results that tell you how to hunt actual geese. And that's not what it's about. But if I get in there, then that's fantastic.
Any port in a storm, right?
Exactly.
So I've noted now, talking about myself when I should be talking about you, that my mom's from a rural environment, and again, I know we're all influenced by how we grew up. So you're a first generation Montanan. How has that shaped you as a writer? Because I know for a lot of writers, their settings are as much characters as any of the human characters in their stories. If you would share a little bit about how being a Montanan has shaped your writing.
I've never lived anywhere else. This has been my home. I was born in a very small town. It was so small that I was the New Year's baby when I was born, but I wasn't born on January 1st. I just happened to come along and I was the first. And like I said, we lived in Butte and then we moved out here to Miles City. I've lived on the west side of the state. I've lived on the east side of the state. And that's it for me. I've spent time outdoors in every part of Montana. And I think just the nature of Montana, the outside, the land, the skies, the earth, all of it, that's a character in and of itself. And I really try to portray that because I think with our lifestyle now as agricultural family, so much depends on the weather and different aspects of what that brings, and you can't ever plan for it.
Right.
And that's just how we roll. And I think just by making sure that I stay true to the fact that it's not just a place here, but it really gets in you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it really did come across, and like I say, that's one of the things I really liked about it. I mean, I do think you have to love it. I mean, weather is hard. I've heard a million stories about weather-related things with my mom growing up and losing cattle to sudden freezes, and there's all kinds of things, and those of us, who live in the city, we can't really relate to it on that level, So I thought it really came across, but it never came across as something negative, and I like I say, I really appreciated it.
Well, that's really great to hear because often it is incredibly negative.
Well, yes. I mean, I imagine, again, I mean, I won't go on about my own stories, but I've heard so many stories from my mom about her childhood in around Sheridan in Wyoming and how rough the winters were. And, in the 30s, long before, any kind of radar and that kind of thing, how the storms would get on you so fast. And it could change everything for your year if you lose too many cattle. Right. So it's a very different lifestyle than anything, where I just pop down to, the grocery store at the end of the block if I need something, so it's a very different.
Yeah. Well, last week it's 2022 and we're not super far into November yet, but our water pipes froze at the ranch last week and we had no water. So that's, I mean, we still deal with that.
Right. Right. Who are your writing inspirations?
Oh my gosh, you don't have enough time.
Pick two or three.
So I would say, I love just about any writer that comes from Montana. I'm a huge fan of Deborah Magpie Erling. She wrote Perma Red, and that's one of my most favorite books of all time. Of course, Craig Lancaster, fan of his before I knew him personally. Russell Rowland is another good friend of mine, fantastic writer, and who I also knew as a writer before I knew him personally. And then I've recently discovered James Lee Burke, and who's often in Missoula. Just my dad got really into his detective stories, and he reads them on audiobook, as he still says. And I said, Dad, it's you're streaming it. But he was so excited about it that I had to pick up some of those, and so I got really into him, and then his daughter Alifair Burke as well. One of my most favorites ever is Janet Fitch, and she wrote White Oleander, and several others, of course, and those are top two favorites. But ask me tomorrow and I would have a different answer.
Like most writers.
Yes, of course.
So again, I talked to a lot of authors, and I always ask the question of whether or not they outline their work or whether they go just kind of seat of the pants. How is that for you with writing short stories? Do you just sit down and go with a seed of an idea, or do you have to outline something to be able to do what you want?
Nope, I sit down and go. And it doesn't, sometimes I don't even have an idea. I just sit and something's there and I go with it. There's a lot of unfinished, not good stuff. And I don't even know that I'll revisit it. But something will catch and I'll just go with it. But no, I am not an outliner. I don't design characters beforehand. For a really hard time with character names. So you might notice that I don't have a lot of character names. It's hard. That's really hard. So no, I just go, and whatever comes out comes out. I had a teacher once who called it verbal diarrhea. And it's not that gross, but that's what it is.
I've been accused of that too. So not for writing. It's interesting that you mentioned that character names give you trouble, because I think every writer has something that troubles them. I struggle with plot. I can write characters and I feel good with dialogue. Those are things I feel good about. But plot, I should say, it's like sweating blood. And I've gotten better at it only because I've worked at it to the point where I have no choice but to get better at it. I know when I struggle, I take my dogs and we go take a long walk somewhere where, without my phone and without all the, interruptions of the world. How do you get out of, whether it would be called writer's block or just a slow period? How do you get yourself back in gear when you're having trouble getting it into gear?
Mm-hmm. Kind of dealing with that right now. I read, and I read again. I never get rid of books. Much to the dismay of anybody who has to pack my stuff at some point in my life or afterlife. I don't get rid of any books, and there are always some that I go back to when I'm looking or feeling something specific that I want to hit. So I've picked up recently The Liars Club by Mary Karr, which is one of my most favorite memoirs ever, because there's something in her tone that I feel like I need right now with something that I'm working on. And also Plain Song, I've picked that one up again too. Just these are where I'm needing to feel right now. So that's what I do. I read.
That's a critical thing to being a good writer. I 100% believe that you have to be not only an avid reader, but a critical reader, read for the story, but also read for the structure and see how writers do the things they do. That's helped me a lot over the course of time. I was just talking with another author about this from Montana, Connor Sullivan. If you get into this game, one of the things you find is there's all these rules. Thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that, and then if you read enough, you find out all your favorite writers, they break all those rules, right?
Absolutely. You can't. And you mentioned craft books and things like that. You will hear all of this advice and just don't listen to it. If it doesn't feel right to you, then it's not right, and it's not going to come out right.
Right. Write your story. That's the thing. I think
Absolutely.
Every writer that I have got to know in the last several years will tell you that. Write your own story. Take the criticism or the feedback. Take the stuff, the changes, of course, that you make, but don't let anyone take over your story. It's your story, right, and tell it the way you want to tell it. And if that means it has a prologue, if it's a novel or something, then put a prologue in. If you want to just write short stories. If you want to do whatever, write. If you want to have a, mystical, paranormal thriller, do that. But, but don't let some archaic rules shape you into something you didn't intend to be, because then it's not fun. And this needs to be fun because it's too solitary.
Absolutely. Like don't set out to be the next Stephen King if you can't handle horror, or just don't, because you're not. Be you, be authentic to yourself and your process and what's going to come out naturally. and don't try to emulate, but definitely take inspiration.
Right.
But do your own thing for sure.
So let me ask you, what's next for you? Do you have another set of stories that you're working on that you intend to produce as a book, or what? I know you said maybe you're a little bit of a slow area right now. What is next for you as a writer?
I've got, like I said, I have a bunch of starts and stops. I have my stereotypical notebook of kind of opening sentences and themes, I guess, of feelings that I've had. Of course, right now I'm really starting to feel like this setting in of winter, kind of this melancholy, with a little bit of anxiety, those feelings. And I don't have anything right now that's like, oh yeah, it's going to the publisher tomorrow. None of that's happening. Hopefully something in this next winter issue of the Montana Quarterly. But no, I don't have a big end goal right now. And I think that's okay. That's not my thing. I don't work well with this has to be done right now, here today. Especially when I don't have anything to do that with. But my process right now is just to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's good advice for anybody, because I think a lot of writers, especially if you're in an early stage of a career, we hear the same thing. You need to write every day, and that's true. But I have another good author friend in Canada who says sometimes you can't, but the idea is maybe you do something for your writing every day. Maybe you jot down a few ideas if that's all you have, or maybe you go back and edit something that helps you understand the next thing, but you don't have to necessarily write the next. There you go. Well, I only have one more question. It's our closing question. But before we get to that, do me a favor, hold up your copy of the book, because I want everyone to see this. It is called Hunting Geese. I love that cover. The face on that fox is just absolutely the best.
I love this. And I know it has nothing to do with the title, but it does have something to do with another story in there. So there is relation. It's not unplanned, but this was offered to me by the publisher and I loved it. It was the only choice for me.
Oh yeah, it's a great cover. Like I say, for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, you can't see the cover. Go to YouTube, watch the video. I guarantee you, or go, better yet, go look up the book and buy it, because it's really, really good. And I think you'll not be sorry that you did.
Christmas is coming.
What?
Christmas is coming.
Oh yeah, there you go. Christmas is coming. Christmas is coming. Winter and Christmas are coming, right?
All of it.
So I always like to end on what I hope is a fun question. I mean for it to be a fun question.
Okay.
So let us say I had the mystical power to put you together with one of the following three people. And in keeping in line with your presence here, all of these are Montana natives.
Oh, okay.
You can choose one of them. I can put you together for dinner, drinks, conversation, horseback riding, whatever. You choose that, but you get to choose one of them. Which one would you choose and why? And the options I'm going to give you are Evel Knievel, John Mayer, or Jeanette Rankin.
Oh,
first woman ever elected to Congress.
Dang. Well, Evel's a Butte guy, and I'm a Butte girl. Boy, but Jeanette. As a former history teacher, I probably gotta go with her. What goes on in that brain? What a time to be a woman, right? What bravery she had. And I would love to just sit and stare at her. Evel, he would have been down for a drink or 20.
Right.
But probably do something crazy that I'm not a huge risk taker and I don't want to get hurt. Sorry, John, I'm not picking you.
Enough said.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Jeanette, I is
Okay.
ranked. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, good. I'm glad I made it a little difficult for you, because that is the idea, to make it a somewhat difficult choice, but not overwhelming. So,
Yeah.
well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us here on the open mic. I really appreciate it. Once again, for those of you who haven't got the book yet, I highly recommend it. These, books that come from small presses, they don't get a lot of publicity. They don't get no one's out there pushing a big PR campaign. Word of mouth is really important. So take mine. I am a very picky reader, a very avid reader, and I will tell you, I really enjoyed it. I'm saying that very sincerely. I think you will too. Great stuff with a lot of heart, incredibly well written, very moving stuff. And I really think you would enjoy it. So,
Thank you so much.
absolutely. And thank you again for coming on the show. I will remind everybody once again, if you haven't done so, please hit the subscribe button, because every episode I bring a great writer on to talk about what they do and how they do it, and dealing with the publishing industry and dealing with all the kinds of things that come with writing words, either for a living or for fun. And if you go back far enough, you'll see I've talked with some songwriters, playwrights, fiction, nonfiction. So hopefully something for everybody. But anyway, the last thing I will leave you with, as I always do, is just a gentle reminder that tomorrow is not promised to any of us. So please make today count. Until next time, this has been Rich Eisen for Sarah Rau Peterson on the open mic, and we will see you next time around.